In order to write off an invoice that we haven't been able to collect on, we're going to want to do a bad debt. And in order to do that bad debt, we're going to create a credit invoice. But before we create this credit invoice, we're going to want to make sure that first, if you're using the full accounting, that you have a bad debt category set up in your general ledger, and you're also going to want to set up a part in your part file for bad debt. If you haven't done this, you might want to stop here and go to the tutorial on writing off bad debt setup procedures, and it will walk you through that. Once you have that set up, come back to this tutorial. Now that you have your general ledger and part set up, we're ready to do our bad debt credit invoice. The first thing we'll need to do is search up the invoice that we need to do the credit for. Once we have the invoice, we'll go to POS, choose Credit Rebill. We'll pick the second option, full credit to an existing invoice with no rebill. We'll answer yes. We're going to pick a reason for the credit. Now I don't happen to have anything in here for bad debt, so we're just going to go with unknown. Now you can add to this list if you go to Admin, Configuration, and then go to the Credit Reasons and add in a reason. And we'll choose Finish and confirm that we're issuing a credit. Now we're on the credit invoice. Now we're using the inventory module, so we don't want these parts going back into our inventory. Also, because we're using the full accounting, we want this to post into our bad debt account in general ledger. Now if you're not using the inventory module and you're not using the full accounting package in Main Street, you could leave the parts that are on here on the invoice and just save this credit as is, and that would be enough. However, if you're using the accounting and inventory, or at least the accounting, you're going to want to remove these parts and add in the bad debt part that we created earlier. So we'll go ahead, but before we remove these parts, we want to make note of the amounts on here because we're going to need to duplicate those. So we don't need the individual amounts since we're just putting one part back in. So if we just go up here to the top and write down the amount of the material and the labor so that it comes out the same and the tax comes out the same, because we're going to want to take that sales tax off our sales tax report as well. So we've written those down. Now we can go ahead, click on our part, and go up to the top here and choose Delete Item, and Delete Item again. Now we're going to go ahead and put our bad debt auto part on. For the quantity, because this is a credit, it's important that the quantity be made -1. We'll put our material amount back in, so we'll click to the material field, and because our quantity is negative, we'll leave the material positive. So that was $155.98, and our labor was $52. So now we have our balance as -217.34, which equals the amount on our original invoice. And now we just have to go up to the top and choose Save. And now this credit will automatically be applied to the original invoice. Now, let's take a look at an invoice where we already had received some payment, but not full payment. The procedures are going to be very similar. We're going to need to pull up that ticket. We'll go to POS, and we'll go to the credit rebill section. Now here we could still do full credit, but we're going to do it as a partial credit. And yes, we're creating the current invoice. We're not going to be issuing an AP check. And again, we'll just choose unknown. And now we just need to make our changes. Now at this point, it can get a little tricky if we've already received a partial payment and there was tax involved. We need to change this to credit so that the amount equals the -142.34 that we are going to be crediting back to the original invoice so that it zeroes it out. But again, there's tax involved. So, and because there was material and labor, we need to figure out, are we going to put part of it on material and part of it on labor? And if we are, then we're going to need to back out enough so that when tax gets added back in, it comes to our 142.34. The other possibility is just do it all under material. Again, we need to back out the tax amount so that when we put the amount in, it adds up to the 142.34. In many states, there's no tax on labor, so the easy way to do it is just to put the whole amount on labor. Now, of course, when you do that, you're not going to have the taxes come off of your current sales tax to get that money back. For the sake of making things easy here in our tutorial, we're going to go the easy route and just put it all to our labor. So again, we don't want to have these parts on here, so we're going to remove these parts. We're going to add our bad debt part in. Quantity is -1. And in our labor, we're going to just put in the 142.34. And you can see our balance now is a little strange here. It's not 142.34, and that's because the payment that was on the original ticket was duplicated onto this new credit. So we need to make sure to go to the Payments tab and delete that payment off of there. And now our balance is at the 142.34 that it should be. And now we simply choose Save, and it applies that amount back to the original invoice. And now we've created our bad debt credit invoice.